Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Bleach Soul Society, the Sneak Entry Arc, episode 37, Motive of the Fist. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So this episode begins with Shunsui, who is the captain of the 8th squad, blocking Shadow's path forward. And he does make a comedic entrance with his Lieutenant Nanao sprinkling rose petals onto him, but then she doesn't stop it, and then he starts, calling her cute and lovely, and she gets pissed off and then just throws the entire basket of petals on top of him before throwing the basket itself onto him, which is comedic, and that is what makes Chad think then that that he's not a bad guy. And so Sato then asks him nicely to get out of the way, but Shunsui basically says he can't get out of the way, but he also thinks that, Chad's not a bad guy either. And so they end up kind of at a bit of an impasse, and Shunsui offers to let him drink, but Chad basically has a mission, and so he attacks by blasting his fist at him, which is deflected with a single hand. Then Chad basically continues to blast his power, and no other hits even come close to hitting. And then this leads him to basically think back to the past to regain his motivation to when, after meeting, like we've seen their original meeting in a flashback, this is an additional meeting, and Chad's being bullied by some gang members, and Ichigo comes in and saves him. That's when Chad basically tells him about his abuelo, who was basically he was born in Okinawa, then he went to Mexico, and then he came back to Japan. After that, his abuelo was in Mexico. He was a bit of a bully. He basically used his size, and if people pissed him off, he then used his fist to communicate. However, his abuelo then taught him the lesson that this is a bad idea, not to do that, and gave him a coin to wear around his neck to remind him not to fight people for no reason and to have like a legitimate cause to raise your fist against somebody, which is a good message. And then that is how Chad lived by when he came here. So he was allowing himself basically to be beat up by these gang members. So Ichigo comes in and destroys them for him. However, then once they part ways, Chad then ends up being confronted by the rest of the gang, who happen to be able to hear over a phone that was left open at the conversation between Ichigo and Chad about the significance of the coin. So they then time up and then try to steal the coin. And this is when Ichigo arrives and he beats up the leader before taking the coin and giving it back to Shadow. Then he calls the police and basically says he needs 5 ambulances for these gang members, and he beats them all up before he then holds the coin up to Chad and says, how about we make a pact that we will raise our fists for each other, not at random. So basically, I'll fight for you and you fight for me. If it's something that we're willing to put our lives on, I'll put my life on the line for you and you'll put yours on for me. And this is the promise made between them. And this is as the title would indicate, motive of the fist of Chad, who then once again gives an even bigger attack than usual. However, ultimately it means nothing because Shunsui then cuts him and again is completely uninjured. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode. As always, we'll rank on our mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So this episode was a bit of a powwow talking at the beginning about the impasse, and then the flashback to Chad's story. And so it is worth 4 points for the multi-arc main character development of Shadow's backstory. Which brings our mostly objective ranking so far to in first, enter the world of the Shinigami, the man who hates Shinigami, assemble the Gotai 13, formation the worst tag, the resolution to kill, Renji's confrontation, the stag and the stray dog, or the star and the stray dog, 14 days before Rukia's execution, tragedy of dawn, Aizen assassinated, the darkness which approaches, penetrate the center with an enormous bombshell, Orihime targeted, release the death blow, break through the Shinigami's encompassing net. This episode came in 15th, Motive of the Fist, Kenpachi Zareki approaches, and then in 17th we have Miracle, the mysterious new hero. Next up we have my personal ranking, and I feel that this episode is a little bit unfortunately placed in the lineup. I mentioned in the last episode that the battle that I have been waiting for, one of my favorite battles of this series, is Kenpachi versus Ichigo. And wouldn't you know it, we get the setup for that grand fight that I want so bad and I've been waiting for, interrupted by this episode, which is kind of a side, let's check in with Chet. And I'm like, I want the fight that I want. So I'm a little bit salty about missing out on that to talk about Shadow, and I don't mind Chad as a character. I think he is a good character. I think he's a nice guy. I think that his motives as revealed here, the lessons that he learned from his abuelo, the significance of the coin and his friendship with Ichigo, these are all nice things to learn. I don't deny that. I like him as a character, but and it did have the funny moment with Shunsui at the start. So I don't think that this is the most terrible episode, but it does suffer from being an interruption to what I am wanting and waiting for. And that's kind of where the personal ranking comes into place. As much as I think that their fight will be entertaining, as much as I like getting a little bit more insight into the backstory, as funny as I found the petals, the petal incident, I spent the entire episode kind of frustrated that I am being denied what I really, really want to see. And that really just kind of destroyed the enjoyment of it. Plus, there is the fact that the first half, apart from that one comedic moment, was basically them talking about being at an impasse. There's also how Chad is supposedly, like this really strong guy. People can beat up on him and it doesn't even bother him because he's got a big hard body. This was indicated to us during the Parakeet saga in the first arc, where he was protecting the Parakeet from the Hollow and he kept getting like injuries but still going, like no problem. And then he comes across Shunsui here and he's basically nothing to him. It's deflected with one hand, he can't even hit him. And then even after he gains his motivation after this flashback and does an even bigger blast than usual, he's the one who ends up injured while Shansui's fine. So it feels like almost like I've wasted what little energy I had to put into this episode on something that ultimately ended up being pointless because it did not work. He did not gain strength. He did not manage a hit or anything of that nature. And it interrupted this fight I've been waiting for, which again, I found so frustrating. So I feel like objectively it wasn't a super bad episode, but personally it suffered from poor timing. And so I gave it a 2 out of 10 simply because I'm very frustrated that they interrupted the fight I've been waiting for this little aside, and ultimately it was also boring because they were just standing around and then also didn't even give me the satisfaction of one of the good guys being in a position of power or winning or anything like that. So ultimately 2 out of 10. And that brings the personal ranking so far to first, the resolution to kill, enter the world of the Shinigami, Kenpachi Zaraki approaches, Miracle, the mysterious new hero, formation the worst tag, penetrate the center with an enormous bombshell, Renji's confrontation, the star and the stray dog, assemble the Gotai 13, 14 days before Rukia's execution, release the death blow, break through the Shinigami's encompassing net, tragedy of dawn, The man who hates Shinigami, Aizen assassinated, the darkness which approaches. Motive of the fist this episode came in 16th for me. And then in last place, 17th, is Orihime targeted. Bringing us now to the series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, the first arc came in at 84%, and this arc is currently sitting at 122 points out of a possible 210. Meanwhile, on the personal ranking, Agent of the Shinigami arc came in at 63%, and Soul Society the Sneak Entry arc is currently at 96 out of a possible 210. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Bleach, Soul Society, The Sneak Entry Arc, Episode 37, Motive of the Fist. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.